Alright, look, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood isn't a bad movie. And I just could not say that one of my all-time favorite directors in Quentin Tarantino is a bad filmmaker. That'd just be bullshit. That would just be stretching things to exaggerate my point, bring a sense of controversy to this, a negative review. I mean, look, the acting is on point. Brad Pitt is so goddamn likable, and DiCaprio obviously is a good actor and acts good. And sure, this film clearly has the work of an auteur behind it. The blocking, the directing, the whatever else filmmakers do, all that shit. It's a skillfully, proficiently, professionally put together film. There's no doubt about it. This has some good characters, this has a great setting, and the potential for all of its elements to come together is crazy high. It's just that they don't. They don't come together in a brilliant or satisfying way. The many pieces made up to fit the movie do not connect in a fulfilling or substantially clever way. Truth is that for all the potential and all the beauty and all the fun this movie had to offer, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood instead let loose and kind of became a bit of a winding, self-indulgent mess. And I know this is going to be a steaming and excruciatingly warm opinion, a hot take if you will, but hear me out and maybe you'll, get off Tarantino's dick for a second and realize that not everything he touches certainly has to turn to gold, even though truly I believe most of it does. I'm a Tarantino fan as much as the next guy, probably more so. But that's specifically why Once Upon a Time in Hollywood hit me even harder than I guess it normally would, and why it's even more baffling as I read all the positive reviews praising the shit out of every move Tarantino makes and seeing absolute genius at play in this movie itself. And it becomes frustrating, and it also makes me feel like I'm disconnected and I'm missing something, but I truly don't think I am. I think that maybe the difference is this. If I've learned any one thing about myself when it comes to my tastes and how I review things over the last few years here on YouTube, it's that I'm a story guy. You can have all the fancy camera play, you can have the most vibrant colors, the most structured compositions, the best actors in the world playing out on screen, but if the story doesn't match the talent and if it doesn't justify the efforts made to the rest of the work, I'm sorry, but I just can't. I need more than a pretty face, and that's what Once Upon a Time in Hollywood feels like. It's superficial. It feels as though it's trying to expose and make fun of Hollywood and the superficial beings within it, but then it proves itself to be instead. And every time it felt like it was going to go above and beyond this theme, and it felt like it was going to make a point about all this and everything, and it felt like the story might finally kick into gear, it instead just goes off on another scene that feels like it's just as irrelevant to the rest of the film as the last. It's a series of tangents. This is a disconnected and unfocused, chaotic mess, and it truthfully pains me to say this because I was so looking forward to this movie and had almost no doubt in my mind that this was going to be at least in my top 5 favorite movies of the year. But I've got to say, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood never wooed me quite like I was expecting. It never engrossed me in its world and had me invested in its characters and actions like Django Unchained did. The story and stakes never felt quite as interesting or original as The Hateful Eight. The movie rarely had me laughing with or at the characters as much as Inglourious Basterds. The pacing and overall process of structure and narrative were never as tight as Pulp Fiction. The action, what little there was never as good as Kill Bill, and the emotion and grotesque nature and upbeat fun never hit the highs and or lows of which Reservoir Dogs did. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is just simply not as strong as the rest of Tarantino's filmography, and it hurts to see, and it sucks to have to say. But I haven't really explained anything yet. Alright, so we're going to dive into some spoilers, so watch out. So Margot Robbie plays Sharon Tate in this movie, right? An old-timey actor, I guess, from the 60s. And look, I'm not going to pretend I'm super familiar with who she was career-wise, and I think maybe we should all quit with that. Yes, I'm sure there are those of you who are valiantly into classic film and are an expert on the topic and the people behind them, but that's just not most people. No, if you have heard the name Sharon Tate, you'd probably have heard about it because she was a famous victim of Charles Manson and his cult. And as the story goes, Manson sent a few of his lackeys out to go kill some people, including this woman, Sharon Tate. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, however, changes that. Instead of heading over to the house they would go to in reality, they go next door for some reason. I don't really know why. I don't super understand the motivations, and there just doesn't seem to be any real reason why this happens other than because that's what Tarantino decided. They just go there by chance, I guess. Because I guess they saw Leonardo's Rick Dalton outside and decided that Hollywood is phony and evil, and so they want to kill them for that reason. I don't know. Anyway, and so the movie ends with them trying to kill Dalton and Cliff Booth, along with Dalton's wife, much to their failure and ultimate bloody demises. History has changed in an almost glorifying way in the context of the movie. That is, if it wasn't so stupid. My first problem here is that if Tarantino wanted to change history, why not have it happen earlier in the movie so that we can see the consequences and ramifications of the historical change? You know, what actually happens now that history went this way instead? Does this impact anybody other than obviously Sharon Tate and the fictitious character of Rick Dalton? If not, why do I care? And if so, why don't I get to see that? It's like a half-assed and weird choice to make right at the end of the movie. And I'm sure big fans of it will explain it away with being a clever misdirect. The whole movie you've been waiting for the events to play out and then they don't. That's not cinematic tension. That's not a clever misdirect. It's just a thing that didn't happen. And for not that much reason, thematically. There wasn't really any character arcs here that were improved by the change, and narratively it just doesn't really add up. Watching a Tarantino film, you're expecting the movie to, you know, get a little brutal, at least at some point in the movie. But when it doesn't happen until the last 10 minutes of a 2-hour, 40-minute bore, it just comes off as imbalanced. They changed history, but what for? And why not change history more? You know, why didn't they change more things? Anyway, think about that ending and then think about the trajectory of the movie overall. There's a strong lack of a beginning, a middle, and an end for any of the characters. Rick Dalton comes closest, but even he doesn't really resolve much, grow, or really do anything. The movie starts off with Rick Dalton feeling shit about his arguably extremely successful career. Boo-hoo. And we spend some time with he and his stuntman Cliff Booth, who is the best character in the movie, if not only because of Brad Pitt's performance. Dalton uses Booth as he pretends like they're friends, but blows him off constantly and makes him do his daily chores and drive him around. Shit like that, okay? There's a character dynamic I can get behind. But does this ever get discussed or changed throughout the movie? No. So it's a waste of time to even think about, if you ask me. And Cliff Booth just does some random shit like fix a TV satellite and fight Bruce Lee for a sec, because again, this is a well-balanced film, I guess. Cliff Booth then drives a hitchhiker home who turns out to be part of the Manson family. But does that tie into the end of the film though? Not really. They just happen to run into each other again. Sick, I guess. All the while, Margot Robbie's Sharon Tate spends the entire day somehow going to see her own movie in cinemas. Without paying for it, because she's rich and famous and shouldn't have to pay for things, I guess. I've heard Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's version of Sharon Tate is meant to represent Hollywood's innocence, or what's left of it. But if you ask me, she comes across as more a representation of ignorance. She plays no part in the importance of anything in this film. Her only role is to not die at the end. And we're all meant to clap and cheer and be like, whoa, that's not what happened in real life. That is so clever. Bravo. Anyway, and then we cut to 6 months later for like no fucking reason. And even though the rest of the movie was like more of a day in the life, yeah, it just cuts to 6 months later, I guess, because it has to be the night of the Manson murder. And now the movie is acting like a ticking clock, counting down the hours till Sharon Tate's death, which again never actually happens. And none of the events in this 6 months later segment really has anything to do with anything prior. And this is my biggest issue. Much of the film focuses on Rick Dalton's acting career and Cliff Booth's lack of a career, which I mean has some point of interest. There's again a good dynamic between them, and Booth comes off as relatable and real, though he still appears happy and affable throughout, despite there being a clear sadness behind the character, which is the best theme of the movie. And if it tied into anything else, which it doesn't, I would absolutely love that. Anyway, like I was saying, much of the film is about their careers and about how much of a shit bloke and failure Rick Dalton is, even though he's not a failure, but whatever. And then the climax of the movie is them getting attacked and defending themselves against the people that they don't really know and with no personal conflict, and then it ends and that's it. So what happens to their careers after this? What happens to Cliff Booth after this? What happens to Charles Manson after this? What happens to Sharon Tate after this? Why did I spend any time focusing on Rick Dalton's career or Cliff Booth's career? Why did the film explain that Booth was about to lose his job and get fired from Dalton if that doesn't actually happen? Did their survival against the Manson family attack make it so that they bond or some shit and Dalton isn't going to fire him? I don't think so. I don't know. The movie doesn't really acknowledge any of these things that it brought up earlier. It's now kind of just a horror action movie type of thing, I guess, and then it just ends. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood sets up things and resolves none of said things. And also, did Cliff Booth kill his wife? I don't know. Does anybody know? Why was this mentioned if it wasn't really even part of anything to do with the plot? How does any of this connect to any of the rest of it? It doesn't, I think, is the answer. This is just like a montage of scenes with reoccurring characters, but no real through line. And it's frustrating to no end when I know that Tarantino is a very smart guy and can easily thread crazily complicated plots together and do so entertainingly. I've seen it numerous times before, but here he just doesn't do that. This is just stuff happening. What's most maddening about this is that the elements were all lined up and there. Everybody was present. Why not, instead of focusing on a fictitious movie star and his dumb career that I don't care about, focus on the Manson family? Humanize them, all the while showing how despicable their actions are. Why not maybe focus on a member double guessing whether they should be a part of this or not? Why not focus on Cliff Booth's connection to the gang and make that more of a common thread throughout? Why not have him be the main character? Why not keep the themes among them and Sharon Tate and dramatize the real events? Change them up as much as you want. Spare Sharon Tate if you need to. Have Cliff Booth kill them all. And most importantly, if you want to change history, do what you did with Inglourious Bastards and have Booth even go back and kill Manson himself. I mean, why not? If you think that ending sounds dumb, it's no dumber than the real ending. It just felt like this was wasted. There was a lot of different things that didn't quite go together. It was like 10 different movies in one, and I don't know. It just was not as tight and focused and fantastic as the rest of Tarantino's movies. I mean, you had Tarantino, Brad Pitt, and Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, this should have been more. This could have been better. So, like, comment, share, subscribe. Tell me why I'm wrong, because you probably think I'm wrong, but whatever. Look, I wanted to like this movie as much as everybody else. I was so looking forward to it, but it just disappointed me. And I mean, that was sad. And I'm sorry, Tarantino. I'm still a massive fan, but I'm not a massive fan of this particular movie.